Hi, I'm Josh, founder of Manhattan Edit Workshop. Welcome once again to Sight, Sound, and Story. Tonight's episode is a glimpse into the cinematography of Foundation. It's going to be a great show tonight. We'll get started in just a little bit. I did want to tell a little story because it was kind of cool and part of why we do what we do. I was at a party on Saturday night and there were two editors there. I didn't know them at all. And we were asking what each other did, and I asked them. One of them is a fiction, nonfiction editor, sort of moving to fiction. Another has been an editor of TV for a really long time, and they asked what I did, and I said I run Manhattan Edit Workshop, and they both knew what the school was. Now, oh yeah, that play. I've been to your events, and that's great. They had heard about us and had fond feelings, and of course now I have fond feelings because that's why we do what we do. And it was really kind of nice to run into some people who you don't know who appreciate what you're putting out there in the world. So thank you for that. Makes it all worthwhile. Tonight's episode is featuring our good friend, filmmaker, editor, all-around great guy, Jeremy Workman as our moderator. And we have cinematographers Cathal Watters, ASC, and Owen McPolin as well. So let them introduce themselves on their own. I will say thank you to our sponsors, AJA, ACE, American Cinema Editors, Avid, Filmmaker U, and of course, the two human beings that make this work time and time again, Jason Benke and Janet Dalton from Manhattan Edit Workshop. They're doing all the stuff behind the scenes to make it easy for me to introduce an event and probably take a little bit too long to do it. So without further ado, let's get into tonight's event, Sight, Sound, and Story, a glimpse into the cinematography of Foundation. Have a good one.
Hi, thank you. Thank you, Josh. Thank you, Josh, for that introduction. As he has said, this is going to be a very interesting conversation that we have these two incredible cinematographers of Foundation. I'm thrilled to chat with you both. I love cinematography. I think I've done a few of these moderating for Sight, Sound, and Story, and I love doing it. And I always ask if I could talk to the cinematographers because they're always the most interesting. My background is in editing and documentary editing, but I've just always been a student of cinematography. I do a lot of shooting myself. Most of my friends are camera people. So I'm always really thrilled to kind of sit down with people and discuss cinematography. It's such an incredible craft. It's such an incredible art. And you guys, the two of you here are really just, standouts. And we're going to talk a lot about your background. We're going to talk about this incredible show, Foundation, which is just remarkable in its beauty and its scope and its look and its cinematography. So I'm really excited to sort of dig in. I put my space background in honor of Foundation. So I first just want to say hello and have you guys introduce yourself. Owen, why don't you first tell me where you are? I know we're all probably in different countries.
Yeah, hi. I am in Prague actually currently shooting Foundation season 3. And that's currently where I am. We've been here for a number of months now. And as you probably know from the other parts of the show, it's a broad scope and we tend to use a lot of different and diverse locations. And Prague is the main base for the studio work. So
Awesome.
that's
Yeah, I want to dig into that as we chat.
sure.
And what about you, Cathal? Where are you?
I am based in Dublin, Ireland, and I'm working on a different show. I'm working on a Sherlock Holmes period show. Yeah, here in Dublin, Ireland. So
Awesome.
yeah.
Well, I am not Irish, so we will kind of roll with it over the course of this conversation. I'm gonna have a million questions. I love the look of Foundation. I love all its different styles and the approach. What I'd love to just learn just at the top, just because I know we have such a wide variety of people that tune into this, just kind of like how your backgrounds, like how did you guys get started? How did you get into cinematography? Just for our viewers, you're both cinematographers on Foundation, but you have very extensive filmographies. I know you both have done a lot of features, a lot of series work. So why don't you just tell me a little about how you got into cinematography, a little bit of your own origin story. Owen, why don't we start with you?
Sure. I'm from the southwest coast of Ireland, a place called Tralee, County Kerry, and small town, not much going on. And I was raised, or I suppose, in that town, there was a very much a culture of sport in the GAA, particularly, which is an Irish Gaelic Athletic Association. And one year, I think I was 14 or 15, one of the Christian brothers who taught us came to the school and had bought a video camera and recorder and went to our class and said, is any of you louts interested in photographing a football match? So my hand went straight up because it meant free classes, it meant I didn't have to stick around maths double for any length of time. I was always able to go out and photograph those matches. And if you can follow a GAA football across a pitch, you can follow an actor across a set. And so up on top of sheds and cars and trailers, we went photographing these matches. And we never won any of them. So no one ever watched the matches. And of course, one semi-final, they won the match. And we went back to play it back. And the cable between the recorder and the camera wasn't twisted home properly. And we recorded 90 minutes of noise. It was a shameful start to my career, but I can say that it actually made me a little more careful in how I captured stuff in the future. Anyway, long and short of it, I was interested in film and cinema anyway. And with a group of friends, we used to make short films. We used to make anything and everything we could during our teens. And finally, I kind of admitted myself, maybe I should try and pursue this as an academic or even as a practical career. So the economy in Ireland wasn't so great back in the 80s when I was growing up. So I went to London and I studied in the UK. I studied a foundation in art first, and then I did a degree in film and TV in a place called the West Surrey College of Art and Design. It was one of the few places that offered a degree, which mollified my parents, who were always very worried that I get some sort of academic achievement, as well as being able to pursue what I really wanted to do. And then from there, I started working on low budgets, features and shorts in London. And then the economy picked up back in Ireland. I came back to Ireland and I caught a break. A really lucky break. There was a TV station opening up in Ireland called TG4, which was the Irish language national broadcaster. And they were having they had commissioned a kind of opening night movie, like an hour 20 movie, a TV movie. And I knew the director. And she said to me, do you want to shoot it? I hadn't a clue what I was doing, not an iota, but I had a very good gaffer. And from there, I started learning really the practicalities of lighting and drama. And from there, I just kept shooting. That was it. Just keep making the mistakes, keep messing it up until eventually that kind of moment happens in your mind where you kind of go, okay, I actually am not terrified going into work in the morning, and I have some level of experience. And then I just kept going, didn't look back, and that was it really. And off I went. So that's kind of it.
Interesting. Yeah, I want to follow up with you about like what you learned in those early days that kind of still stuck with you. But first, Cathal, why don't you also tell me a little about like how you started and how you got there, got to where you are now as well.
Sure. Yeah. Well, first of all, my brother was a professional photographer, so he used to take press photos and that. And we had a darkroom at home, and he was developing his photographs at home and all of that. It was obviously pre-digital. And so as a young fella, I was interested in photography, and then I started taking photographs of myself and developing them myself. And then I decided I would study theatre and drama in college. So I went on and I did a degree in theatre and drama. And then when I finished that, as part of my degree, I was doing like, I was writing a film, I was making a short film, and there was a lot of camera work involved there. And obviously I was always taking photographs. So then at the end, I just decided, look, I just want to, you know, have a camera in my hands. So it's funny, like, you know, what Owen was saying, catching his big break, it was the same TV station that was starting up
Mm.
back in like 97, I think, or yeah, TG Cahir. And the only job I could get, because I had no notion, I had no clue, was TV cameraman. They were hiring. So I became a TV cameraman. So I was a news cameraman. So I'd travel around the country. And I spent the first 6 months before I could get a camera in my hands, because you had to edit your own packages. I had to edit for someone else. And to be honest, that first 6 months when I had to edit a news package for somebody else under pressure, you know, because at that time you had a certain amount of time to do it. And then, you know, if you made a mistake, you had to go back to the beginning and start the whole process over again. It was before non-linear editing. Anyway, it was the best training you could get for a DOP, is to be forced to edit for a while. But then anyway, after 6 months, I started shooting, and that then led on to documentaries. And I've been lucky enough to travel a lot with documentaries. And then somebody trusted me to shoot a film, and then it just kind of snowballs after that. You get your second film, and nowadays there's an awful lot of TV, because I think, you know, the standard in TV, as we all know, has gone up so much that, you know, a lot of the budget is in TV rather than features. But, you know, I'm lucky to fleet between both TV and film. But there was a long period there where I was still doing documentaries, but I'd try and shoot shorts, or you know, I'd shoot shorts, I'd shoot, you know, anything I could, music videos that was in any way creative, for anybody. I was very happy to do that. And as Owen was saying, it's just, you know, getting out there, shooting and learning. That's what it was all about. So that's kind of pretty much it. I still think I'm learning, but like as Owen said there, you kind of get to a stage, and I've only gotten to it recently, to be honest, where you feel you're 10,000 hours in, and you don't go to work with a fear of kind of going, feck, will I be able to do this? It's kind of like, well, how will I do this? Which is just really great. But I think also, you know, you're surrounded by better people, because now you've got more experience. You're working on shows with loads of other people as support and all of that. So, you know, I guess as you move on, you know, you're surrounding yourself with good people as well. So that's always helps.
And for both of you, and I'll start with you, Owen, like what in those, like those early days, like when you weren't on working on big budgets and you weren't doing, big projects, and you were just doing like one thing after another, what did you learn that you think really was helpful for you now, doing, these massive shows and these massive projects?
I think when I was at that stage where I was getting a kind of a grip in my career and hoping it was going to pay off in my 20s, late 20s, early 30s, where you have to kind of make a decision where you're going to run with it. And it was a transition, but mostly between film to digital. Dramas were starting to migrate away from Super 16 and move into digital acquisition with red cameras and the D21. And I was just lucky to be around at that time where it was actually going from one system to the other. And because of that, I had literally feet in both camps. So I had experience both shooting film and, as the nascent technology started to take hold, in lower budget drama, getting a hold of digital cameras like the Red One, which came out, oh my God, 2002, maybe, something like that, 2003. And so learning the pitfalls of those cameras and the early Sony cameras, like the 790, I think it was, which was like a Betacam, but it was HD. It was a HD system. And they were unforgiving camera systems. it was very easy to make mistakes in them. We actually succeeded in being one of the first people to burn a hole in the sensor of a red one by pointing it at a laser, not knowing what on earth was happening. We looked into the sensor and we go, what is that kind of liquid pouring out of the surface of the sensor? We phoned LA and they said, oh, I bet you pointed that camera at a laser, didn't you? I went, how'd you know that? Oh, we had that problem before. We'll send you a new sensor and it'll be fine. Wow. So those mistakes, those horrendous mess ups, gave me a kind of a little insight into, well, it just gave me a little ability to, and I wish I had learned it earlier in my career, to relax a little. Because no matter how much a disaster befalls you, or how much you know less about a subject, you end up getting enough experience to allow you to relax in the role as a cinematographer. It's unfortunately, it's so cart before the horse. I wish that I had the temerity and the personality to be a more relaxed person when I was younger, and then allow the creative to wash over me. I found I was probably, as a younger cameraman or as a cinematographer, I was probably too focused on the minutiae and the micro, as opposed to the macro storytelling of it. The idea that there is an idea, there is a look, there is a theme, there's a subtext, all that stuff, and you kind of lean into that and let it flow out of you. And I wish I knew that at a younger age. Now you learn that with experience as you get older, and you have more experience of failure, disaster, mayhem, and then when you sense that you can recover through those things, you become more relaxed working in a larger environment where there's more collaborators, where there's a larger amount of crew, because the noise in your head, there isn't as much noise in your head, and you can focus on the voice inside you, the creative voice, and you can give that expression. I know that sounds really obscure, but it's true, and it took me a while to kind of understand that about myself. That's just a personal thing now, and everyone else's journey is completely different. But that was me, where I actually started improving and actually starting to really enjoy being a cinematographer. That's why I said sometimes I'd wake up in the morning, I'd look out the window, and we were shooting a drama on a 790, and I'd go, oh my God, it's sunny outside. How am I going to control that sun? Because I've got 3 stops above where highlights are going to be blown out, and I've maybe 2 stops below that. And as you know, burnout and a bad toe in a signal, you can never recover it. And so those things terrified me, and I should have just kind of went, don't worry about those things, they'll look after themselves, because it starts restricting your view of the storytelling. And that's what I learned, I think, and that's what made me better, or get better. I don't know if I'll ever get to where I want to be in terms of my ability, or even just being satisfied with my work. That's a separate question, but I am certainly more comfortable in my skin going into jobs of this scale, as much as I am now of going into a job which is a fraction of that.
Yeah, for people watching, we'll definitely see this scale very shortly when I start showing clips of Foundation. But Cathal, what about you? Also your background, doing documentaries, doing news. How did that impact what you're doing now? And how did that kind of stick with you now, all these years later?
Yeah, and look, I mean, just what Owen said there, and he's talking, this is a personal thing for him. I could be saying the exact same thing. I know exactly how he feels. I think, you're going along. I think one thing for me is, when I gave up on perfection, that was actually such a release. It was actually freedom, because you're always trying, whatever it might be, lighting a scene or whatever, that it was like trying to reach this goal, this, where everything is perfect. And once I realized actually, hang on a second. And I'm not saying I'm not striving for perfection. What I'm saying is I'm not burdened by it. I'm not like chained by looking for perfection. That I'm happy to let things go a lot sooner. And that's not me compromising, but it's just the idea that sometimes perfection isn't where you need to be. But like in the early days, I went around with one, we call them redheads, like an 800-watt lamp, and I lit everything with one light. And that taught me so much in terms of lighting, that I was able to bounce it, go direct, light the background, not the person, all these different things. So, and then as Owen was saying, to be able to do things under pressure, to handle things under pressure. Now I have a mantra, and I say it pretty much every day. And I say, we're making art, not history. That the idea of what we're doing is something artistic, that, we're not saving lives. We're it's an artistic endeavor we're all trying to do. And a lot of the time, there's pressure, there's time pressure, but I genuinely think there's no problem that we as cinematographers have that can't be resolved by money. And money equates to time a lot of the time. So, I do think keeping a level head, I've had to learn that over, not that I ever didn't have a level head, but just, to be calm within myself, to kind of realize that there's a lot of noise around, and to listen to how, it's there's so much noise around on these gigs, whether it's small or large, that at the end of the day, it's an actor or actors in a situation. You've got a lens and a camera, and that's what you're capturing. And everything else is kind of, you have to look beyond that. It's all helping with the image, but at the end of the day, you kind of have to just hone it down to what you're capturing. And I think that's kind of what you were saying, Owen, because it's something similar that you need to kind of, be able to listen to your creative thoughts and not have that muddled or something. But like, I mean, I think, we've the greatest job on the planet, because every single shot I do, if I'm happy with it, I get a massive sort of sense of, okay, that's done now. I've banked that. The light in the face, that's the way I wanted it. I got it right. That's it. They move from there to there. It looks natural. Whatever it may be, that it's such a giving profession, because a million times a day, I feel either I'm ready to go home and jump for joy at something, or else I'm ready to go home and whip myself for doing a bad job,
Yeah,
whatever it might be.
you're
But
right. It
you
is very black and white, Cathal, isn't it?
yeah, it is massive.
Some days you go, my God, this is, you say, I am so gratified. I've managed to pull this off. But always in the back of my mind, like you've just articulated, is that there are days when it does not work. It does not come together. You do your best. It's like pushing inertia. It's like pulling a rock up a hill, and it's just impossible to get where you're going. And sometimes you just got to own those days. You kind of go, okay, this day sucks. Everything I have planned is gone to pot. Nothing's going to work. And then you kind of have to lean into that and kind of go, okay, so what is the worst that can happen here? And then you experience it, and then you climb out of that. And then the next day, it can be like a polar opposite. It's like a rainbow of success. But and that's why it's so demarked between and maybe that's probably what's attractive about the role, and also what is most unpleasant about it too, is that there is no gray area. I find there tends to be, if you're toddling along and it's a nice shade of gray kind of creative output, it gets sticky, and it becomes more difficult to be good, and to enjoy that process. And so I find there is quite a mark between those creative kind of results.
And it is, I don't know about you, Owen, but I have to, like, it doesn't matter who else says, oh no, that looked good, that looked fine. I have to it doesn't matter what anybody else says. I have to think that myself, and I'm my worst critic. So anyway, I think we're all like that.
Yeah. I want us to start looking at some clips from Foundation. Let me just give a little runway for everybody. This is season 2, which you guys both were part of. Foundation is this incredible show, and it's so. And I think a lot of the conversations that a lot of the topics we're already sort of starting are going to come through in a lot of these clips, and when we start digging into Foundation. It's so ambitious, it's so stunning. It's this space sci-fi series, but it's also like beautiful and has all these different looks, and the lighting is incredible, and there's a lot of different, like, I feel like every time it goes to a new planet, especially when it was in season 2, it had like a whole different look. The visual effects are incredible. There seems like there's like miniatures and just like this incredible variety of locations and sets. And so I think it's going to offer us like a lot of conversation. So what I think I'd like to do is just kind of, there's great short clips that we have of both of your work from season 2. And maybe what we'll do is just kind of like watch them and then kind of drill into different topics on it. But yeah, this stuff's really, really beautiful. So I'm excited to show it.
Think you can breach my armor?
Demerzel.
Incredible. So yeah, I want to also play the Owen scene, but first, why don't we just drill into this a little bit, Cathal? Just about this scene and just some of the we could get as sort of technical and as we would say in the States, inside baseball. Not a sport that you guys are familiar with, I'm sure, but as we want. But we could also look at it sort of generally and broad. Obviously this is this kind of stunning, challenging scene with choreography and lighting and light sources, and it just seems phenomenally complex. How did you wrap your head going into this scene?
Yeah, I think, well, look, I mean, obviously it comes with the script, and the script was early morning, and and obviously all of this is done in very close collaboration with Alex Graves, the director. So, we sat down, looked at it, and I think we knew it was going to be a naked fight. This was a big thing, obviously. And then we knew we wanted it to be silhouette-y, and then it had all the feel of kind of, it's sword play, it's the blind angels, it's, there was a shield, and all of this. So I kind of came up with this idea of lighting it with fire because it was very centurion. It was like, centurion sparring or whatever it might be, kind of gladiatorial kind of sparring, this sort of thing. So the idea was that it'd be lit by fire and that on one side the light would be coming in. So, so that was the basic concept. And then in terms of the fight, being honest, Alex had this idea of how the fight would choreograph based on the script. And we basically, myself and himself, photo boarded it way beforehand with, stand-ins. And then we worked with the stunt people of, how we could do certain things. And then obviously we needed to talk to Chris McLean because the head gets sliced off and all of this. So Chris is the amazing visual effects supervisor. So he was talking to us about that. But it was kind of fun in the sense that here we are doing a sci-fi show, but we're lighting it like it was, Rome in 900, So I kind of thought that was a bit tongue in cheek as well in terms of the lighting, because, and that's the thing about Foundation, at the end of the day, it has to look kind of, good and high quality and cool. And then hopefully it falls under the umbrella of Foundation. The Foundation umbrella is massive. Owen is doing, worlds on, which hopefully he'll get a chance to talk about on a desert. I'm in a jungle shooting this world and all of that. So this one, and then I kind of auditioned different lights to give different flares into these beautiful lenses we had. We'd ultra vista lenses and anamorphic. So I was trying to get lights that would flare the lenses. And I auditioned, I don't know how many lights to get the proper flare. So I ended up using ARRI orbiters with very tight, you can change the different lenses on them, very tight lenses, because I found, because the pillars were so big, I would need 3 or 4 of them, because as we went around, one would hide, let's say light A, and then I'd come into light B, etc., etc. But there were net curtains there. Well, I won't say net curtains, but they were something akin to curtains. And I had a scissors in my back pocket because I found I couldn't get the right light into the lens to flare it up unless there was a hole. So I spent my time putting holes in these curtains, trying to just at the right time where the camera would pass to flare the lens. So, it was great seeing Lee Pace worked so hard on himself in terms of his routine, etc. It's all Lee doing those stunts. It's all him. And, that's an incredible thing for an actor. He built himself up over the time for this particular scene. So, it was just really cool to shoot. And
are you working, and I want to, this will probably be a question that comes up a lot, but like when you're working with different directors and these different looks, how much prep are you guys doing to kind of create that color palette for each scene? How much, pre-viz and storyboarding and kind of prep work are you doing to get those looks?
Look, the beauty of Foundation, from my mind, for season 2, certainly we had lots of prep because we're shooting, it was myself, Owen, and Tico were the cinematographers, and there's 4 directors, and basically we were shooting in locations. So we'd all go en masse to one location and we'd shoot it out, and then we'd move to another location and shoot it out. That's if I had, story pages in the locations Owen was shooting or whatever it might be. So it meant then that, I'd be shooting for a day and Owen wouldn't be shooting for a day. So we would have lots of days off in between, and that's when we could do our prep, and the guys were really good. If we would be able to pre-light. So, we went in there on the day and, within the hour we were shooting, because it's very complex. There was nothing left on the last minute that, oh, well, let's try a light here or try a light there. It was like, no, it's pre-lit. We know what we're doing. This is the first shot and we get into it, because no matter what, there's a finite amount of time to get these sequences, but I found, and Owen, please jump in, prep was key in this, pre-lighting was key. And there's so many times when you're working, in different sets where there's lots of cues. So just after that, Lee Pace's character is dumped into a basin and the light changes from top to bottom as if something is happening in this medical suite and all of that. So all of that has to be pre-planned, programmed, etc., etc. So prep is key. And Owen, I'm sure you've loads to say about that.
Because we were afforded those periods of time when we all rotated through a certain jurisdiction or country, or in this case, some islands in the Canaries or Prague, we always had an opportunity with our respective directors to really detailed prep. And most of the directors I worked with, Goyer and Roxanne, they both had large amounts of time to work with the script, primarily because David Goyer was one of the main showrunners and writers on the job. Mm-hmm. And also he invited creative discussions and contributions to that process, even while shooting, even while we went through prep. So say if Roxanne bumped up against a certain line or a certain piece of action, she always was able to go to him and say, listen, I have a problem here. We'd like to go in this way. We'd like to photograph it in this style. We'd like to, this is what we're going to do. And he'd go, yeah, or brilliant, or no, I would prefer you to maintain this. So there was a constant kind of rolling through of the creative process as we prepped. It wasn't like this is set in stone. You've got a day to shoot it and off you go. We had way more time to actually tease it out, to actually figure out how to actually create the mise en scène and to actually mount the shots we needed to do. Some sequences were far more complex than others, like Cahill's Blind Angel fight was long and complicated. And whereas every episode, both Tico and I and Cahill all had larger and sometimes very involved sequences where it demanded prep. Otherwise, we just wouldn't be ready. We'd show up on set and sure, we wouldn't be turning over till 2:00 in the afternoon unless we had the prep and we had the time to actually create or shoot what we actually wanted to get. So because the show, it was a long period of prep, long period of shooting, we were afforded that time. And it's like, fix it in prep.
Have you always had that much prep? Like when you were working on Peaky Blinders, did you have that kind of same prep?
No, not at all. Like on Peaky Blinders, there might be, we might turn up and we'd start lighting that morning, despite what people like Peaky Blinders, despite, it's heavy hand everywhere. It's, we couldn't afford to be pre-lighting. Certainly we do our recce's and our tech recce's, but I'm not even sure we had a rigging gaffer, in that we didn't have a gaffer that would go on and make sure everything was in place for us. We would have pre-calls for the main gaffer, but we didn't have, so
right. So no, this was like a luxury for you guys on this one.
And that's probably why this show definitely has a different vibe, a different feel. We were afforded the time to sit it up.
Yeah, I mean, Foundations, it's really beautiful. So it really has that level of achievement. I'd love to show a scene from Owen here. Episode 2 in season 2, The Visions. Another one, just again, another really beautiful scene with a very different look. how are you sort of, also similarly very complex, fire, visual effects, just, very, very complicated shoot, I'm sure. So how were you kind of, prepping and wrapping your head for that look?
That was David Goyer directed that sequence. And it was the introduction of the main antagonist in season 3, the mule. Our hero, Gail, gets transported forward in time and then encounters the mule in this sequence. And he was adamant that he wanted to do it in a oneer, albeit compacted at certain times, but he wanted to try and make the sequence feel that the character was experiencing it in real time. So with that in mind, we said, okay, she has to get from her arrival into that puddle, be seen by the mule, attacked by him, shot by him, projected over a mound, and then land on the other side of it, and then be lifted up, and then transition back to the present day. So for that, we kind of went, okay, well, obviously, if we have to do this in a oneer, we need to shoot 360. So that all drove the look. So we went to special effects. We said, all right, guys, you will do much of the lighting for this with explosions. We had a drone which had a lighting on it to create kind of a moving kind of spaceship firing blasts, etc. at the ground. It's a futuristic battlefield, so it was in the middle of a war. And that added to the visceral excitement of it. So the more elements we could throw at it, the better. That would light the environment. And then from that point, if we needed any additional lighting, we built that into the set. So she had to travel underneath a hooded area or a roofed area, and we were able to bury a couple of balloons in there, a couple of rigs to have some lamps secreted about there, and then fire, water, rain, flying drones, everything. Just throw the book at it to try and create that sense of you're literally caught at the front line of a war. And that's what drove it. And that actually was how we lit it, pretty simply, but complicated. But that was the main thrust of the idea.
Where was that shot? That was in Czech?
It was in Prague.
It was in Prague.
It was in the old cement or old steel factory outside Prague. And there was a number of sequences shot there. And that's where we chose to do it, and chose it in mind. But again, we the first time we approached or recce that site, it was like a good 6 months before we shot it.
And
so
that opening section of it even it goes, it's doing like some very interesting like sort of technical stuff with the spinning, and did that pose like new challenges specific for just that as well?
Yes, David wanted to create a transition, very much like the persistence of vision effect that you would see in a rotating. You've seen them turn of the century where you'd look through.
Yeah, like a zoetrope.
That's right.
Yeah.
It's a zoetrope type effect, and by running the camera around on set and doing numerous passes with the character sitting in the middle, we did the same rotation on set in the location in the steel factory. And that provided you, and then within the set, we brought elements of rain, lightning, explosions within the set. And then when we went to location, we did the same.
Wow.
Yeah.
How were you shooting that? were you shooting like some Steadicam and handheld in there as well? And
yeah, the rotation zoetrope effect was on basically just a rotating dolly with a fixed nodal head that just focused on Gail. And then when we went we did a rotation shot on set, and then it's very difficult to see it, but you'll actually, when she gets blown off the table, there's a tiny little edit there, and then she lands on location in the steel factory into a puddle, flat. And then from that point on, it's one single Steadicam. And there's a couple of buried cuts and a couple of blasts. Obviously, there's a close-up of the mule. and then she gets hit in the chest, and there's an edit there, and then she lands on the other side, and we follow the mule over, and then he picks her up, and so on, and we do a 360 again, and then transition out.
And for both of you on these very complex scenes, one is a big, fight choreography, the other is this big battle scene. I mean, are you and the director, are you storyboarding these, or are they, and you're kind of working with them? Yep.
Yeah, like down to the nth degree. And Art, that sequence, absolutely. And I presume, Cathal, for you.
Yeah, oh no, for sure. Like in terms of that fight, it was storyboarded, but then myself and Alex went and we took photographs on Artemis, that tool that you can see your frame in. And so like literally we spent a day, I don't know how many 100 photographs we have. And then being honest, the way Alex shot it was incredible, because he just wants, I'm just doing this shot now. And that's it. And now I'm doing this shot. It was very much the way he wanted to shoot it was just get this shot, and then I'm going to this shot. It never ran on massively. Obviously, there are some shots that, appear to, there are wide shots that, go from there to there. That's all we did. And then we moved to another shot. It was, it was really well done in terms of how he wanted to shoot it. But yes,
was that for the precision of it, or was that also just, for time and getting all the shots in your day? And
it's precision of it, but it's also, in terms of he holds up a bowl of fire, the fire gets flung, so we know where that is, because it's all shot out of sequence as well. So it's all of that. So the way Alex liked to work is every day the start of a new sequence, we would pin up the storyboards, and afterwards we'd go with a big red marker, that done, like it was as simple as that. But yeah, it was all done, all storyboarded beforehand, and we had it. So the initial storyboards, and then they were augmented from our stills, and then obviously the fight choreography changed as well, and then it ended up being, they revisited the storyboards. They were pinned up, and we shot the shots in out of order.
Yeah, check them off.
Yeah.
I want to look at another Owen clip. We have Jason called The Mission, which is also just another minute-long clip, but it'll also sort of take us into another territory.
You're here by Lady Demoiselle's grace, not mine. The transport that brought you here can just as easily bring you back.
Lady Demoiselle said that Glaywin is still alive.
Glaywin...
Oh, don't play games.
He waits behind that door. You'll see him after we talk. If our talk goes well, you'll find him alive.
What's the mission?
Reconnaissance. We have an informant on Siwenna.
That's a spy's work. Siwenna's not a military threat. Not unless they're weaponizing cacti. So who's your actual concern?
Over 100 years ago, Harry Seldon stood where you are now. He claimed he could establish a foundation to read the future and shorten a coming age of darkness. Now I believe it was simply a ruse to buy his people time and distance. Currently, his followers worship his memory and recruit members from the fringes of empire. I want you to find out if the foundation is a threat to me.
So yeah, I like showing a scene like that too, because, it's not just always these incredible action scenes or choreography or war scenes, but, a scene with a lot of actors and a lot of lighting and sort of, really nailing a look of it so that an audience feels like they're going into a world. So I'm curious about, how you kind of built that look, and how you kind of came up with those kind of that palette and that style with the director as well.
So that scene took place in the throne room, which features a lot throughout the entire series, both season 1 and 2. And it's a very large space. And it sometimes creates a lot of distance between the subjects who often come to speak to the clones, the Cleonic dynasty, day, dusk, and dawn, and in that scene, it's very much Day taking on a former naval officer, which used to be in his employ, but was disgraced and was sent to a penal colony. And obviously that is the reason why he is in such a rag order. And now he's been invited back to the court in order to mount a mission to Terminus to determine what is going on with the Terminus faction. And he needs the help of this, should I say, disobedient and yet very talented commander. And so Goyer really wanted to kind of underline the fact that they are both at odds. The Imperium, Day, the emperor is on his throne and is threatening his former officer, but the former officer is having none of it. But so he wanted the fact that it is both a very intimate scene between both those characters, but it takes place in this very large kind of throne room. And so it kind of, and this is, as you rightly said, what it comes down to is not sometimes how many spaceships, how many planets you blow up and how many battles you encounter. It's that drama between foes, and that drama drives the story. And in this scene, we wanted to make sure that Day was always a little above the eye line, and he was lit in a very different palette compared to Bel Rios, his disobedient commander, who looked like crap and is lit in a completely different warm way. And if you progress to the scene, you'll notice that eventually they will come down and they speak to each other on the same level of each other. And the lighting slightly changes a bit. It gets all cool as he approaches him. So we wanted to just highlight the subtext that both these guys hate each other, but they both need each other. And so that's what was underpinning that drama. And that's what we just wanted to show in a really simple way by lighting and staging and where you put the camera. That's a good illustration of it.
Yeah. Are those looks that when you're developing those looks with a director, how does that process work for both of you? Like, you know, a scene like that, when you're exploring those ideas and developing that look, is that something that you and David are sort of discussing? Is that coming much earlier in the script stage? Like, where is that work? How does that fit in the process for you to develop those kind of ideas?
Well, when you sit down, you page turn with, say, the director, in this case, David. You go, okay, what do you need here, David? What are you thinking? And he'd go, in that scenario, he went, I need Day to be the most powerful one here. But then he comes down and I'm going to stage it where they literally stand nose to nose and threaten each other. And I want a certain point where I want the tables to turn. So he goes, okay, how do we create that photographically? Have you any ideas you can throw in the pot? And I'd say, okay, how about we do this? How about we just divide the lighting? And then when they come together, maybe we make it harmonious. We make it the same kind of lighting when they're both threatening each other, and make it a little harder and make it a little colder. And you won't notice the transition, but it happens. And he goes, Grant, I like the sound of that, because I don't want to be too self-conscious about the lighting, but it would be nice to shift the tone a little during the scene, because I think that whole scene lasts about 4 minutes. And so, not that you should change it because just for the sake of it, because it looks good, which is a valid reason, but it also just underpins what you're trying to say in the story, albeit in a subtle way. And it also engenders an interest in creating something more interesting for me as a cameraman, as someone who's trying to imbue a little more meaning, or a little more, just use another tool that the audience is going to see or sense or feel, rather than just playing it straight. Don't deny the tools that are at your disposal via lighting, mise-en-scène, camera work, movement, all that stuff. Use them if you think they're going to apply, but then also just don't do them for the sake of it. Don't just like take every knife out and put it on the table because you think you can use them, because then it's just a bit of a mess. So you'd offer them to David or Roxanne, depending on who I work with, and then they'd go, that sounds good, or no, that sucks, don't want it, that's a completely rubbish idea, go away. Not that they've ever said that. None of them has ever said that, and I think Cathal will underline that it was always incumbent upon us and to be invited in to show what have you got here for me, because we had time to think about it. You see, it wasn't like we were reacting. We actually had time to give it thought, and thus when you're afforded the time to give it thought, invariably you will come up with something, because you've just let it mull over. And if you didn't come up with something at that moment, it would come later when you saw the rehearsal or you saw the storyboards, or and so on and so forth. But we're all in situations where we would be on a show and you'd have an hour to light an entire set, and then to discuss what the shots are with the director, you'd have another few minutes. There's no way you're going to do your best work. It's just not possible unless you're designed, unlike anyone else in the human population. It just isn't enough time. Whereas if you have time to think and ruminate over it, you will create something different. And that's the difference.
Let's have a look at another scene from that you shot, Cathal. The most intriguing one from episode, the second season, episode 1.
Welcome to Trenta, the eye of the Empire. Please respect and enjoy the peace. I am Empire. Cleon the 17th.
Empire, I am Rue, enjoiner to the Queen. Allow me to present the doyen of the trade leagues, prime witness of the Cloud Cathedral, and most excellent Queen, Sereth I, sole descendant of Dominion.
So many titles, and yet you omit the most intriguing one, bride-to-be.
Provisional.
Indeed.
Neat one. Yeah, another really beautiful scene. I'd love to ask you about like working with different departments on a scene like this. You know, it's just the incredible set design and costume, and just how do you as a cinematographer sort of, you know, work in those ways?
Yeah, and I mean, I think, you know, myself and Owen were talking about it earlier, it is that collaboration between all the departments, and that's what's amazing about Foundation, because like everybody, I think working on Foundation challenges you to do your best. There is no one working on Foundation that is kind of going, I'll get away with, you know, half-hearted, you know, lighting or makeup or anything. But that particular scene, you know, it's funny, it takes place in this, and this is a good example of us trying to tell the story exactly as Owen, you know, spoke about earlier. You know, that's the exact same throne room that Owen lit in a very different way. And Owen lit it a beautiful way to tell his story, and I lit it in a different way to tell my story. And to my mind, that scene is kind of, it's so typical of a throne room, you know, shafts of light coming in. But to my mind, you know, the Cloud Dominion coming in, that's what it needed, you know. But like we knew Cloud Dominion, these new, you know, new type of people, the introduction of this character, their makeup was very, very particular in terms of the dyes that they use. It's very, very special, and they come bearing gifts later in that scene of these particular dyes that are derived from plants and animals, etc. And they're given as gifts, and they're special, very, very special all over the universe. Anyway, so color was very, very important. And then also the dresses, the way they dressed, they were going to be swirling dresses. So I remember, you know, climbing up in the gantries in Troy Studios in Limerick, where the throne room was, and finding these shots that had been done before, but we went, I think, a little higher to get this procession around. So again, it's like Owen was saying, we have prep to come and think about these things, to, you know, to make sure what we're doing is adding to the story being told, you know. So again, it was these shaft-like rays coming in. And I remember, you know, the sets were so big, they were kind of joined up against each other. So we had to check with everybody, was it okay to saw off half another set so we could get a lamp in to get a similar ray of light in with the same degree? So, you know, there was all that sort of fun going on. Yes, we can saw off a bit of that set because we won't see it again. But I guess, you know, that's the perfect example of collaboration of different departments. Like, we chose shots. We had shots storyboarded to accentuate the dresses. You know, her hood and the way the cloth moved. We auditioned those in the sense that, you know, the costume designer wanted us to see the cloth, how it would move and all of that. So, you know, those costumes were made for that specific moment. We, you know, shot them previous to the scene just to make sure it was going to look good. So again, it's that prep, it's that thought beforehand that Owen was speaking about. It's key, and Foundation give you that, and in doing so, they demand that you, everything you do is to bring the story on, you know. I
Are
hope
you
that's
guys
answered something.
are you guys able to go to the grading, you know, to grade these scenes? Like, do you get to get involved in that, you know, or is it like, well, it's moving so fast as a series that you're not usually able to do that?
No, it's expected that we do.
Yeah.
It's required, and they encourage it. We graded, well, I think you did as well, Cathal. We graded remotely in Dublin. They streamed it from LA, or sorry, Company 3 in Canada, in Toronto, where it was colored. They would stream it to us. They'd send us a copy first. We'd watch it on iPad and iPad Pro with certain contrast ratios involved. Then we'd watch it in a grade 1 suite in, I think it was Screen Scene in Dublin where we did it. Then we sent some notes to Tony Dustin, the colorist, who's bloody amazing, really. And then you do a pass, send that. And then I think I had one more pass on each episode just to give it a look. And if there's anything he missed or dropped out or missed out on, we could contribute then. But also as well, because there was lots of gaps in a lot of the timeline at that point, because a lot of the visual effects hadn't been finished. So sometimes we'd choose a thumbnail, or I'd say, this tone in this shot is what you're aiming for throughout the sequence. If the sequence wasn't finished, or there was a lot of VFX missing out of it, and he'd go, Grant, I got that, thank you, let's move on. Or sometimes we'd have, the whole scene would be complete because there would be a very few amount of visual effects. It wasn't normally the case, to be honest, but more often than not, we were able to give him a really good guide, and he ran with that and understood the look that we were leaning into, of which we obviously dialed some of it in during the process of on set with our DIT, Simon Keenan. We'd go a certain distance on it, but obviously he would finish Lutted.
And that kind of makes, you know, dovetails to another question that I wanted to ask, a general one, which, you know, I could ask you, Cathal, which is just about how technology has changed. You know, Owen's talking about, you know, remote grading and iPads. And, you know, obviously there seems like there's a lot of, with the lighting, there's probably like these very, you know, the LED boards, and everything's programmable. And, you know, just, I'm curious about how technology has really changed over the course of your own career on a show like this. You know, obviously visual effects, obviously, but, you know, how does that impact you as a cinematographer?
Yeah. Well, I mean, certainly cameras and then lighting. I mean, they're huge questions. I mean, well, look, in terms of lighting now, say in relation to Foundation in particular, you know, a massive, you know, leap over the last 10 years has been LED lighting and programmable lighting. And like really high quality LEDs that render like good quality colors. You know, we spent, I don't know how many years thinking we had these great 1x1 LED lights and they were all green, but we still embrace them. But you know, in terms of that technology, it's all very, very programmable. And then in terms of, you know, moving around a spaceship and having lights dim up and dim down, depending on where the camera is, not for any effect, but to create drama on the face in terms of the lighting, that you can do that. And, you know, again, that's all done in prep and it's pre-thought out. But the idea that you can dim them up, dim them down, change color, change the tone very, very quickly and add a sequence. I know there's, you know, I did a crash landing into Ignis and how the different, you know, we gave a personality to each of the different lights. And, you know, we spoke, you know, in the pre-light, we were joking with the board op Jonathan. It was like, well, this guy is, you know, he's been on the town all night and he's kind of sick. So he'd get the idea that he's kind of shaking or whatever. And we'd translate that into something that would mean something for the light. So in terms of technology like that, lighting, it's come on leaps and bounds, and it's, you know, it's incredible. And then in terms of camera, I mean, how long might you have? But like when we're on site, we're like Simon Keenan, the DIT, like we're, you know, we're coloring on the fly. And, you know, we're all doing to a different, I know, Owen, you like to use the wheels yourself.
I was going to ask that, like, how much are you guys, you know, how much are you guys operating in there? How much are you guys on the wheels, you know?
Yeah.
For
Well, unfortunately, on Foundation, I don't know about you, Owen, but I really didn't operate. You know, a lot of the time we're shooting with two cameras. I think it's very important that someone is there keeping a close eye on everything and, you know, liaising with the gaffer very, very, very closely. So like the show I'm doing at the moment, I'm operating and I love it, and I operate an awful lot on other shows. But on Foundation, you know, I don't know about you, Owen, but it was key to be able to stand back and keep a watchful eye.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. Some shows you're able to operate, not just physically, but you actually have the time, and it's relatively simple. But on a show like this, it is rather big and sweeping. There's a lot of balls in the air. There's a lot of lighting cues because of the development, as you say, of LED systems and boards. And obviously there's coloring to do. And then there's to keep an eye on both cameras, sometimes 3 cameras, sometimes 4 cameras. And it's just not physically feasible to actually keep an eye on all of those elements going on both in front and behind the camera, and pay them the necessary attention that they are due based on the vast amount of prep that we had, and to see that actually be achieved in the shot. Sometimes you're lucky to say, actually, do you know what, on this one, like we had really, really good operators, and we just, every now and again, we'd have really good communication with them saying, look, on this one, like I didn't use talkback, but some DOPs, I think Tico did, I'm not sure if you did, Cathal, and they would actually guide the operator in terms of composition during the shot. I would just normally give them a little note beforehand if there's something particular I wanted. Otherwise, you leave it to their own artistic judgment on how they want to compose. And away you go. And if it's wrong and it doesn't suit your taste or the aesthetic or the emphasis, then you just go back and say, listen, Dave, or Dave Morgan, one of the camera operators, I said, look, come back a little bit, ease up a bit on that, just ease up a bit, loosen out a touch. Or at that moment, director would like you to push in and and there'd just be a conversation.
Is that how you always work? Like if, you know, on, I know you did Penny Dreadful, is that different from how you would approach it on a different show?
Yes, I suppose on this one, every show is different. Sometimes directors would say, I want you to put on a 32mm there, and I need you to start there, and I want you to finish there. And they have a complete independent conversation with the operator. You'd earwig it, or you might involve yourself. But if the director is confident enough, know what they want, and they're very articulate and specific about what they want, You let them get on with it. Some directors say, I don't want anything to do with that. That's your bag. You deal with it. And I'm going to deal purely with the actors. And other times it could be a fusion of both. So you kind of judge the tone of the piece, and say on Penny Dreadful, that was a mixed bag. Sometimes I would operate, sometimes I wouldn't. It was more a single camera show that, but more often than not, there would be an operator there, again, because of not so much lighting cues there, but there was a large panoply of actors and a lot of ensemble pieces where you'd have to keep an eye on stuff. So, but there's some other jobs where I would operate, put it on the shoulder, shoot the whole thing. I did a little low budget film last year, and the whole thing was shot in 18 days, and it was all pretty much on sticks or on my shoulder. So, depends.
Yeah. What just because I know somebody will ask in the comments, what cameras are we shooting Foundation on? Are they just Alexas and Cook lenses and that kind of thing?
No, we went for it was kind of it went backwards. Rather than decide the camera package, we were very interested in choosing the right lenses. The first season, it was a mixture of anamorphic by 2 anamorphic and spherical lenses, and I pushed. And everybody, Tico and Cathal besides, were all like, yeah, let's try it, to get ultra vistas, which are large format anamorphic lenses. So they would, when we shot on DXL2s, which they fitted because they're a Panavision package, and they were anxious for us to use their cameras. They were red cameras under the hood, effectively. But because they had a Monstro sensor, because these lenses anamorphized to 1.65, they anamorphized fully onto the full area of the Monstro sensor, giving you rendering like a 7K image, which is extremely high resolution. But it also had lovely, like semi-spherical, semi-anamorphic characteristics. I think they were used originally by Greg Fraser on Dune 1, and I was anxious to get my hands on them. And we did get our hands on 2 sets. And as a result, we got the imagery that we got.
And they're old lenses that are rehoused, and
they're rehoused,
They sound heavy.
Yes.
Yeah.
They were.
And they were full of personality.
Sure. Yeah. They were
you
all
can see
different.
it. You can see it.
Yeah.
Like no 2 matched quite exactly to each other. And because the glass was old, I think they originated from 1950s Ultravision, Panavision, which they rehoused. But sometimes there, old glass like that's going to have something to say to you sometimes.
It was beautiful to get.
Yeah, I want to look at another scene too. There's all this great stuff like on a desert planet in Foundation, and I know, and we have a clip from one of yours, I think, that is from that. And it just shows like a whole nother look to this series.
The future you've seen may very well be immutable.
You were happy to get the word Ignis from my vision and act on it. Now, if I do it, it's wrong?
Here's a difference which you should already grasp. My plan makes small changes in the present to adjust large events in the future. You want to observe one very small event in the future, the death of a specific human being, and apply massive forces in the present to avert it.
Salvor solved your first crisis.
She had help. Every historical condition was on her side, and if it hadn't been her, it would have been someone else.
Conditions? You didn't put any psychohistorians on Terminus. And if it wasn't for her abilities...
I intended one psychohistorian to be on Terminus! Right? In another life, you might have taught your daughter all about my vault.
You seem to think you're very indispensable.
Well, Gail, it is my plan. But no. At enough scale, I am insignificant.
This illustrates these lenses and how beautiful they really are. The format for that scene we talked about to Goyer, because the lenses render onto a large Monstro sensor, they actually render as to 2.72, which is much wider than the 240 that you've got in the rest of the series. It did actually capture stuff on the left and the right. So for those sequences, we zoomed out, and you get the full 272, which only those lenses can do. And also you see how the lovely contrast works in that desert area. Like, there's nothing you're going to do to beat the sun there, and you can't bring in large fly swatters and silks because it's just too remote. So we just said, let's go au naturel. We've got enough bounce from the sand, and we might get lucky with the sun. We turned it around now and again, of course, so we have a little backlight. But it shows as well that sometimes in the desert, just own the fact that there's going to be hard sunlight, because you're in a desert. Why soften it? Let it render hard onto the actors' faces. It's certainly, like Jared was, like, you notice he's squinting a little bit because the volume of light was just enormous. I think we shot it in the Canaries and the south of Lanzarote. There's an area there where they shot a lot of solo. And that's the sequence, those dunes where we shot there.
Yeah, how does your approach, for both of you, how does your approach different when you know, you're on location and dealing with all the elements of location? Like, you know, I have some friends that shot in the Canaries, and they said, like, man, it's really difficult. It's beautiful, but it's the elements make things very difficult. And how do you sort of, you know, process through that when you guys are working in location?
I mean, look, we had a set that we were going to shoot on, and it was a pool by the water, and we thought we had everything arranged. So it was a man-made pool at the edge of the water, and we had done a couple of recce's, etc. We'd spoken to the locals, and it was all going to be, you know, perfect. And that's where we're going to shoot this big sequence of, you know, Jared Harry being tied. And basically we came and there was a storm, and we spent 4 days waiting for the storm to abate. So what we did was, at times when it wasn't too bad, we did drone shots, we did big wide shots. We had to shoot some sequences with actors on rocks, and then Rory built that pool in Prague. But and then all of the underwater was shot in Prague and not on site. So I mean, there's an example where Mother Nature just kind of basically said to us, "You're not shooting there. You can build it in Prague." You know, so it's no more than any other show. We can't control it, obviously. So it's just to kind of implement the usual things, whether it might be fly swatters for sun or whatever it might be. But and then sometimes you just go and we're going to embrace this, you know.
Yeah, you get lucky.
And we get lucky. And you know, we're doing the usual thing where, you know, we're shooting on a beach, and it's like, well, we chose this beach because we can shoot this angle in the morning and shoot these 3 scenes in the morning, and then we turn around, the sun's behind us, and shoot these 3 scenes. But we can't kind of manage for the scenario where the sun is in and out all day, which is what happened. So you're just trying to manage it like you would anything else.
And Owen, what about for you? Like, when you're working, you know, like, how does your approach and your technique change, you know, when you're suddenly having to shift into, you know, the environment?
Well, the good thing is, being from Ireland, no 2 days are the same, no 2 hours, no 2 minutes. And so when I was learning and trying to figure out the whole idea of this bizarre concept of lighting continuity, and how to wrestle with that, you kind of learn at a young age how fearsome nature can be. And then on the basis of that, you just learn how to deal with it. Like, I shot a job called Vikings, and it was mostly shot up in the hills of Wicklow, which one day would be splitting the stone sun, and the next moment it would be lashing hailstones. And the crew and the cast and all the technical people knew how to deal with it. You just have experience to deal with it. It just hardens you to what will change. And in a show like this, you kind of bring a bit of that experience with you. And what you've learned the hard way, or what I have learned the hard way, is don't let nature offend you, because she will often give you something back in spades that is much better than you ever anticipated it could be. And so because of that, you have the usual tricks, which is turn it around into the sun, so they're backlit if you can, if you're trying to control it. If you're trying to say something else, turn it around the other way, turn it into the sun. If it's lashing rain, okay, let's try and get it all as much as we can. If you can do the close-ups first and shield them, great, or own the rain and then just bring in towers to wet them while we do close-ups if it's stopped. So it shouldn't discommode you from doing your best work. The audience will forgive you if the story and the imagery and not getting away of the actors allows you to tell the story. They'll forgive you anything if you approach it in the right way. If you're trying to keep fooling them, or you keep cutting, or you keep going to the back of someone's head, or cutting to a hand tapping on the table, you just lose the rhythm of the piece. And it's very important that Cathal said that knowing when to cut, where you cut, when you make an edit as a cinematographer, is knowing where that happens is just as critical in all of the melee of creating that mise-en-scène, as well as knowing how to deal with the weather. Then you know how the scene is going to come out, because you know you can cut away, or you can sustain it. When a cloud comes in, just run with it, ride the exposure, or let it go dark. Don't try and fight against it, because or try and use something to get out of that. If it's a disaster and it's falling apart and suddenly you get hit by lightning, grand. There is certain limits, but more often than not, lean into it, own it, take it, and it'll be fine. Don't worry too much about it.
Cathal, what's the biggest challenge for you on a show like this?
The biggest, I mean, look, there are many challenges, but then there are many, from challenges you get kind of the rewards as well. So I think, like, specific challenges, or just in general?
Yeah, either.
Well,
I mean, obviously, because one of the reasons why I asked that is because, I mean, in some ways, Foundation seems like, a cinematographer's dream. It's just so much incredible stuff, and it's beautiful. And as Owen and you have been mentioning, you have a lot of time in prep, and there seems like there's a lot of toys and a lot of ideas. But what really, at the end of the day, you're like, oh man, that creates some real challenges here.
Okay. Yeah, well, look, I mean, first thing is, like, you have all the toys, you have the technos, you have these beautiful lenses, beautiful, amazing actors, everything. You've got all this prep, so that does not leave any room for messing up. Do you know what I mean? So, like, it is kind of like, everyone expects it to be like amazing, and you have to get up there because you're given everything. I think if somebody says to you, right, you have to go into this room, you've got one light, you got to make it work, I think as a cinematographer you're going, I can do this. Whereas if somebody says you can shoot wherever you want, you've got all the toys, you've anything you ever wanted, and now make it look beautiful, then it's like, oh feck, how am I going to do this, or what am I going to do, because there are too many options. So I think the only common thing that in all of these sequences is the story. You have to be true to the story. And I think with Foundation, there's an authenticity to it, even though it's science fiction, or it's way out there, or it's dystopian, or it's, it's in different worlds. It's authentic to the piece. The visual effects from Chris McLean, the sets from Roy Shane, it's authentic, and it's of one piece. I don't know if I'm making sense, So that's the challenge. It's to tell the story properly, because
Yeah,
you've
and
everything
that
at your
cohesion.
disposal.
Yeah.
Yeah, don't. And I think Owen said it earlier. It's kind of like, you know, when you're starting out, all of this noise is all there, and you just have to kind of chill out and go, telling a story here with an actor in a place and glass and, you know, lighting, and
Yeah.
that's it.
Don't get in the way. I think
Yeah.
someone
Yeah.
said, don't get in the way. Even if you have all the resources, you say, you mightn't have all the time, but you have those resources. They're always at your disposal. But sometimes it's better to just leave them alone and let the actors do what they do best, and look at their faces. Let them convey their emotion, and the audience will pick up on it. Don't get in the way sometimes.
Yeah. And like, the thing is, like, say your, you know, your mule sequence, the war sequence, like, it's bombastic and everything, but it feels of the place. It's not. It is out there. It's incredible. You have drones, what you were explaining, you know, and different sequence I've done. It's out there, but you don't want it. It's a fine line between taking somebody out of the story and keeping them within it and being true to it. And I think it's driving from authenticity. That's what it is. And, you know, you're talking about, you know, Becky, the guy, you know, you're on a spaceship that these spacers are going all around, and, you know, I had to have this light play on the pilot as this spacer ship was coming, and there's all these spacers. It was too amazing, you know, electricians from Prague with flags in front of a light doing this. And like, I remember videoing them because it was just so funny. But the effect was of the time. And then, you know, what Chris did in visual effects, you know, and what Rory did in his design of the spaceship, having a window up here and the, you know, working it all together, it felt of one piece and it felt authentic, you know. So
well, I want to, you know, we're in our home stretch. We're going to wrap up in a sec. I just want to play one more clip, and then we could do a little wrap up after. And it's just, it's a short clip, and I think it's really great. It's a clip from that you shot, Cathal, called Beautiful. And I think it also just kind of, one thing I do want to just quickly touch on with both of you is just use, you know, how you guys work with VFX and integrating that into your workflow. So yeah, why don't we play that one, and then we'll kind of look towards the end here.
Beautiful.
So just a real short clip, but, you know, tell us about that one in terms of just, you know, why that clip for you?
Well, yeah, I mean, I guess, you know, that kind of just shows the kind of collaboration we've both spoken about that is inherent on Foundation. I remember being on that, and we were pre-lighting it on a Sunday, and later on in that sequence, in the same place, basically the ships start to explode, and it gradually gets nearer, and before they explode, they, you know, jump from where they are and then jump into another place and explode, and it gets nearer and nearer and nearer. So basically we had this set with this massive window, and we had lights, and myself and Martin Grinnell, the gaffer, we spent a whole day trying to program these lights. But it was key that the timing of these lights, the color of these lights would marry up with what Chris was going to do afterwards. So there was no point in me even dreaming it up. Well, actually, I think I came to Chris, and we sat down, had a chat, and was like, right, when these guys jump, what do they emit a color? Is it what would it be, or whatever it was? And then when they come, do they survive for a second and then it explodes? So we're trying to do all these different things. And you know, it might have been over a beer that we kind of said, how does this work? But I remember doing this sequence of lights that we just did on one light and then sent it to all the other lights. And, you know, Chris wasn't around for the pre-light, but I like videoed the pre-light on a white piece of card. And it was like, what do you think of this? And it's like, oh, well, what if we shorten this or shorten that? And once we had that sequence, then we programmed it into the lights. And then as the camera wraps around, we'd have to make sure all the lights on this side would turn off, you know, or whatever it might be. But it is that sort of collaboration that when you see the finished product, like that wrap around there, when I was looking out, it was just, I was looking into my lights, you know, which was just awash with sky panels, you know, and as we came around. So, I mean, look, it's just a simple thing, but it is, you know, you're shooting it on the day and you're going, I hope what I'm doing marries up with what Chris is going to do outside.
Yeah, it's really lovely. I love what you did there.
No.
Yeah, and Owen, you know, if you could also just talk a little about that, about just kind of like how you as a cinematographer are also sort of, you know, balancing the visual effects that are going to affect your shooting, affect your image, affect your lighting, and how do you, you know, kind of work that into your brain?
Well, Chris McLean always had either himself or a rep from visual effects on set when there was a heavy VFX day for us. Maybe in that sequence when there was a planet exploding outside or spaceships exploding or whatever. And we'd always have a chat to say, okay, what's the main thing we're trying to get across here? How big is it? How massive are you going to, is this effect going to be? Does it demand a large amount of interactive or less? What's in your head? And he'd go through really quite specifically what was in his head and what they were going to create. And on that basis, we'd either pre-light it or have it set and programmed. And rarely was there any a time where he said, actually, no, that's not quite what we're going to have. He would obviously invite us to light it first, obviously having had that conversation with him. Then he'd look and he'd go, yeah, that's fine, that'll work great. Or need to tone it down a little bit. So that was one kind of visual effects kind of conversations that were always had. The next thing, which I found like incredible on this job, and I've never had it since or after, is his Chris McLean's total lack of the need of blue or green screen. Now, that's a huge thing for a cinematographer because of the spill issues. If it was ever a green screen, it would always be really small, minor, and fast. Everything was either rotoed or was black, hanging outside those windows because mostly we were in space, or even a gray screen. And that was it. For a show that was so heavily reliant on visual effects, I found that absolutely liberating. I've never had that experience in my life. And also the introduction, and I said it earlier to Cathal, the use of smoke, which is always a nightmare for visual effects vendors. Chris would say to me, just put it in, let the vendors deal with it because they're going to have to do it anyway. And sometimes if having done a plate without the smoke and then making the comp, they would often neglect having put the smoke back in the final visual effect. So he said, if you have it in from the off, it's going to have movement dynamics that are completely true to smoke, create your depth and all those things. And then they will have to find a way of dealing with that and integrating their visual effects to it, because that's the layer that creates the reality. Because he would always try and encourage us to say, all I'm doing is enhancing the reality of this world that we're in, and try not to draw attention to the fact that they're visual effects. And that was his mantra. I am just going to enhance the existing sets, the existing world, the deserts, the water features in La Gomera, the architecture in Tenerife, or the sets in Limerick. I'm just going to add to that. I'm not creating anything from scratch. I don't want to, because it'll always look shit.
Incredible.
And that is really refreshing.
Nice.
Yeah, and that's harping back to what I was saying earlier. It's just authentic.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, kind of, throwbacks to your early days shooting news and documentaries.
Yeah,
But with
exactly
that,
the same.
yeah, we're gonna wrap up. I'd love to just, one quick, tell me what you guys have next. I know, Owen, you're hard at work on season 3 Foundation. Cathal, you're working on a new series. What else are you guys
Yeah.
doing? Quickly looking ahead.
Go ahead, Cathal.
God, I'm very happily talking to 2 directors about 2 feature films coming up. So I'm trying to
Exciting.
get yeah, really exciting.
I'm looking very much forward to having a holiday.
Nice.
I want to go to Portugal and lie on a lilo beside a pool with my kids and not have anything really to do with filmmaking for just a little period of time. And then if someone gives me a call, that's great. But for the moment,
for about 2 weeks, Owen, that's it. You'll be back.
yeah. Then back on that horse, the wife will say.
All anyone has to
that's
do
what I
is,
want.
watch some episodes of Foundation, and they'll totally understand where you're coming from. Those are very, very complex scenes. Anyway, it's been like a real thrill to chat with you. We kind of went through a long time. Cathal, it's already dark where you are, so
Yeah, sorry about
that's
that.
yeah. You
My
too,
lighting
Owen.
lighting was getting
exactly.
more dramatic all
Very
the
handsome
time.
Cathal with the
I
lighting.
know.
Very
So
handsome.
yeah, this has been fascinating. Thank you so much. Really
Not at all, a
appreciate
pleasure.
it.
Thank
Just
you, Jeremy.
really
Thank
exciting
you.
to talk to you about this great show.
All right.
And
Good stuff.
everybody, you guys should just really check out Foundation and look at it closely and see all this great work that they've done.
Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot. Much appreciated. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks again for watching Sight, Sound, and Story, a glimpse into the cinematography of Foundation. Thank you to our moderator and our panelists for an amazing and insightful evening. I can't tell if I'm looking at the camera. I'm looking down at my computer. I'll try to keep looking at you guys at home. It's harder than it looks. We got 2 more great events coming up. We've got Sight, Sound, and Story. We're behind the editing the bear coming up on June 26th, and then Making the Grade, Exploring Color's Role in Television on July 24th. Both exciting events, so please tune in. If you like what you see, send us some comments and let us know what else you'd like to see or what we could do better. We're always looking to improve ourselves. Once again, thank you so much to AJA, ACE, American Cinema Editors, Avid, Filmmaker U, and Jason Banky and Janet Dalton from Manhattan Edit Workshop, as always, for making it look easy. Again, I'm Josh from Manhattan Edit Workshop. Thank you guys for watching as always, and stay tuned. We'll see you next time.
Probably one of the smartest things I've ever done for my career. It gave me all the tools that I needed to be able to jump into a new career.
Getting myself into a mindset, thinking like an editor, and being around people that I can talk to on that level was really invaluable to me.
A lot of the things that I learned from that class, I still think about.
I loved the classroom. I loved the computer stations. We built a sense of community.
And it also instills a lot of confidence in you to take that and go out into the world.
After I took the class, I felt very prepared to take the next step.
I owe Manhattan Workshop the career that I have right now.
Things have been going great, and I really have the Manhattan Workshop to thank for that.